All right. So we are talking about a text which is called Dṛg-Dṛśya-Viveka, and we usually do maybe one verse a day, and so it's one verse a week actually, and it's been several months with a break of 1 month. So I thought I would just give you a brief summary, which will of course benefit those who are new also, because they also wouldn't be aware of what the text is all about. So I'll just mute you all so that your disturbance is not there on the recording. I would request you all not to unmute yourself. So this text is called Dṛg-Dṛśya-Viveka, which means the discriminative analysis of the Dṛg and the Dṛśya. Dṛg is the one who sees, Dṛśya is what is seen. So seer, seen analysis. This text belongs to a category of texts called Prakarana Grantha. So those of you who are starting the study of Tattvabodha tomorrow, that is also a Prakarana Grantha. Prakarana Grantha is basically an introductory text. Now there are two types of Prakarana Granthas, in fact more than two types. One is the very basic text which gives the basic outline of the philosophy and the definitions, the concepts, and one type of text which gives that is Tattvabodha. Then there is slightly advanced Prakarana Grantha, which is meant for those who have got some experience, some amount of Shravanam and Mananam has taken place, so senior student. This is Dṛg-Dṛśya-Viveka is that type of Grantha, meant for the senior student. So those of you who are absolutely new may experience a bit of difficulty, but don't worry about it, because this study goes on and on and on, and after some time it will all start to make sense. So what is this Dṛg-Dṛśya-Viveka about? This is called a prakarana. It's a way of looking at Vedanta. Now we are not very clear on who is the author, because in the old days, unlike today, the authors didn't believe in putting their names onto the texts, because of course it is because of the belief that the teaching is not their own. The teaching has been given to them by their teacher, and so they didn't want to claim any credit. So it could be Adi Shankaracharya, or it could be his disciple, who was a very excellent Acharya called Vidyaranya. So these are two people whom we think there's a possibility that they have authored this text. There is also a third gentleman who's in the running, who was the Shankaracharya of Sringeri Mutt in the 14th century or so. He's called Bharati Tirtha. So any of these three could have been the authors. Now, as I said, it's a prakarana. It's a method of analysis. So this text, it introduces the jiva and analyzes the jiva from the viewpoint of the seer and the seen. And it divides the jiva into three pairs of Dṛg-Dṛśya. So instead of using the English seer seen, I'll be using Dṛg and Dṛśya. Dṛg means the seer, the one who sees, and Dṛśya means the one who has been seen or what has been seen. And our experience, our interaction with the world, that means the interaction of the jiva with the world, is analyzed through three sets of Dṛg-Dṛśya. So the first set is the Indriyas, the sense organs, and the Jagat, the world. So sense organs, Jagat. Indriya Jagat is one set of Dṛg and Dṛśya, where the Dṛg is the sense organs, the Indriyas, and the word and the seen, the Dṛśya is the world, the objects of the world. Jagat, when I say, it means all the objects in the world. So multiple names and forms differentiated by color and size, all those things. So for example, if you take the eye as the Dṛg in this case, then the eye is the seer and the world is the seen. So here there's a principle that the Dṛg is one, but the Dṛśyam are many. So the seer is one, but the seen are many. And this principle applies to any of the sense organs, whether it is the ear, or whether it is the skin, or the nose, or the tongue. All of them, the experiencer is one. What is experienced is multiple. So that is the first set, the Indriyas and the Jagat. Now we take one step backwards, and the Drishyam becomes the sense organs. So we are taking a step backward from the world into oneself, right? That is the analysis. From the world, how do you arrive at the whatever is innermost? So first there is the world, which is Drishyam, the seen, and then there are the sense organs, which is the seer. So you have the experiencer, experienced, Dṛg-Dṛśya, as Indriyas and Jagat. Now when you take one step back, what happens? The Indriyas become Drishyam, becomes the experienced. And then you have to see what is it that experiences or knows the Indriyas, right? So all of us know that the Indriyas give inputs to what? To the mind. And therefore the second set of Dṛg-Dṛśya is the Manaha and Indriyas, the mind and the sense organs. So the sense organs become the seen and the mind becomes the seer, right? So what recognizes the sense organs is the mind. That is the second set. Then comes the third set. What is there in the mind? The mind becomes the Drishyam. Mind becomes the seer. When the mind becomes the seer, what is being seen? The various thoughts of the mind is being seen. And how are you conscious of those thoughts? Because of the consciousness principle alone. So now comes the third principle, which is the Ahankara, also known as Sakshi. So Sakshi and Manaha is the third set of Dṛg-Dṛśya. So you have three sets. You have Indriyas, Jagat, then you have Manaha, Indriyas, and you have Sakshi and Manaha. Now this first set and the second set are all relative, because from one point it is Drishyam and viewed from another point it is Drik. So these two sets, the first two sets, which is Indriya Jagat and Manaha Indriya, they are relative. Sets are relative itself. The seer is a relative seer. It is not an absolute seer. But when you go back to Ahankara, the reflected consciousness, then that is absolute, because there is nobody to see the Ahankara. So this seer is the ultimate seer. The Ahankara or the Atma here, the reflected consciousness we call it, is the ultimate seer. And this, because of this ultimate seer alone, because of this consciousness alone, the jiva experiences the world through the mind and the sense organs. The RC, or rather the original consciousness, the Atma, remember, can never directly experience anything. It requires the mind to experience, and the mind requires the Ahankara to know the mind. And therefore, Atma is able to see the world, experience the world only through the medium of the Ahankara, and then the mind, and then the sense organs. This is the basic introduction to this text. Okay, how are these formed? So you look at the seer number 3, which is the Drik number 3, which is the Ahankara, the original consciousness itself. That is never formed, because OC is Atma. Atma is an eternal, independent entity. Always there, always will be there, beyond time and space, and self-illuminating. Does not require any other entity to give it, to recognize its presence. And we say that because of the mere presence of the Atma, it lends sentiency to the mind, because of the reflection. So here in this book, it's called Chitta Chaya, the reflected consciousness, which is the sphere number 2. The reflected consciousness here, sphere number 2. Because the reflected consciousness is reflected in the mind. The mind, remember, belongs to Prakriti, that is to say, Anatma. Anatma is considered Jada, inert. And therefore, if it has to be able to recognize something else, it has to be enlivened. That enlivening takes place because of the Atma alone, or the consciousness alone. Then the text talks about the composition of the mind. So the mind is said to have 2 parts. The material aspect of the mind, which we call the Dṛg-Dṛśya-Viveka, Dravya meaning material, and the function part of the mind, which is called the Vritti Amsha. So mind's 2 things. In Patanjali Yoga Sutras, it's known as mind stuff, the Dravya Amsha, the entire mind. And Vedanta says that there is the thought part of the mind which goes out, envelops an object, and because of that alone you know it. So that the 2 parts, the Dravya Amsham and the Vritti Amsham. Now this mind which has been made sentient by the Atma, which has as if got life due to the consciousness borrowed from the Atma, this mind associates with the body, associates with the sense organs, and thus through the sense organs, it makes the jiva capable of experiencing the external world. So mind is always dependent upon the Sakshi. It is a very closely associated with Sakshi. Why? Because the mind we experience is not an inert mind, because our entire thoughts take place because of our mind and because of our intellect. And therefore, the bond between the mind and the Sakshi, the reflected consciousness, is so close that it cannot be broken as long as the mind, in the sense the Sukshma Shariram, is available, right? Because if you think of the mind as a reflecting medium, as a mirror, how do you separate the mirror and the sunlight in the mirror? You cannot. Only way the sunlight in the mirror disappears is when the mirror breaks. And therefore, as long as the Sukshma Shariram, which is the mirror, is available, the mind consciousness connection is very close. It's not possible to separate it. It's because of this very close connection that the mind is mistaken for ourselves, the Atma. So this mind and Atma connection, the RC connection, is born out of delusion. That's what Shastra says. Because the mind has no real connection with the Sakshi, it is only enlivened by the OC, it's only enlivened by the original consciousness in the presence of the consciousness. And if I'm aware that I, the original consciousness, have no real connection with the mind, but it is only a seeming connection because of the fact that the mind is exhibiting a reflection of me. Once that I understand, then the mind will no longer be able to disturb me. If the mind is no longer able to disturb me, what does it mean? The Indriyas are no longer able to disturb me. If the Indriyas are not able to disturb me, it means the world cannot disturb me at all. And therefore, I am free from all disturbances, because all disturbances belong to the world alone, belonging to Anatma alone. And for a proof, it gives the example of the deep sleep, so Sushupti Avastha, when the mind is fully resolved. In those states, I am not, in that fully resolved Sushupti Avastha, I have no disturbance at all. I don't even know that I'm a man or a woman, or that I'm rich or I'm poor. So I am completely free from disturbances. Now this ahankara, the I notion, that I am so and so, that comes when the mind is active, fully active, right? And out of this I notion is born the my notion also. So ahankara and mamakara, these two are what help us to experience the world, giving us pleasure and pain, and this is called samsara. Thus, the author is saying that we who are currently identified with the first two sets of Dṛg and Dṛśya, that is, the first set is the Indriyas, we are identified with that, and later on we identify ourselves with the mind. We should stop identifying ourselves with Indriyas or the mind and identify ourselves as the Atma alone, and observe that everything that I see is not me. And once I do that, then I resolve samsara. I get over the samsara. What is samsara? Samsara is because of the ignorance of my true nature. How is that caused? Because of Maya. These are all very elementary topics, but I'm just repeating so that those of you who have not too clear about that can get a little bit of revision about that. So we talk about Maya. Maya has two powers, the Vikshepa Shakti and Avarana Shakti. So Vikshepa Shakti is the power of projecting. Avarana Shakti is the power of veiling it. So this Vikshepa Shakti projects the entire world, the entire Jagat, which means what? All the way up from inanimate matter to Jivas to the entire Jagat. The entire universe is nothing but the manifestation of Nama Rupa. And this Nama Rupa is Mithya. We said that. Mithya is something which is dependent upon the Satyam, like the necklace is dependent upon the gold. And therefore, this so-called existence of the necklace is only because of not understanding that the necklace is nothing but gold. In the same way, we have to understand that as a jiva, I am a mixture of two parts. One is anatma and one is atma. Or you can define it as satyam and mithyam and mithya. So the first two sets, that is of Indriya Jagat and Manaha Indriyas, the first two Dṛg-Dṛśyam set, they are under the Mithya category. And the first set, third set, basically, the original consciousness or the Atma is the Satya category. So this is the reality. The problem is that because of the Avarna Shakti of Maya, the veiling power, this distinction between Mithya and Satyam is missed, is mistaken always. And there are two mistakes which comes out. One is that at the individual level, I forget that I am Atman and identify with the first two Dṛg-Dṛśyas. That is to say, with the body, mind, sense complex, I identify. And that makes me a samsari, full of insecurity. Now that is the mistake at one level, at the individual level, at the vyashti level. And at the samashti level also I make a mistake. I forget that the Brahman is the only Satyam. I miss Brahman and I take the world to be the truth. Because of this problem, I develop a wrong self-image. And mixing of this Satyam and Mithya is said to be the cause of samsara. So it's called adhyasa. I take the problems of the world to be my problems. It's a superimposition. Now, if I have to understand and remedy samsara, if I have to get out of samsara, I have to understand the cause of samsara, and then only I can have a remedy. So what is meant by understanding cause of samsara? I have to unravel this confusion between Mithya and Satyam. Why? Because it is this confusion which leads to adhyasa, the superimposition. And I've given this example very many times, that a clear crystal lying close to a red red flower will appear to have a red color, and no amount of cleaning the crystal will change the red color. All I have to I don't have to do anything actually. When the crystal is next to the flower, I don't even have to remove the flower. I only have to understand that the color which I see in the red crystal is a false color transferred upon to the crystal because of its proximity to the flower. That is all that needs to be done, the understanding. So this association of between the two can only be broken by understanding, which takes place where? In my intellect. So even though I continue to see the red color, in my intellect, I know that the crystal is colorless. Okay, this is essential Vedanta. Okay. Furthermore, we said that every entity, any object in this world, which includes Jiva also, can be thought of as consisting with 5 characteristics. So, Asti, Bhati, Priyam, Rupam, Nama. So, Asti is existence, Bhati is consciousness, Priyam is happiness. So, Sat Chit Ananda, and Rupa and Nama, Nama and Rupa. So, if you think about it, any object that you take, including your own body, including yourself, not body, just the body, but yourself as a Jiva, there are 5 aspects: Asti, Bhati, Priyam, existence, consciousness, Ananda, and the name and the form. Now, this Viveka, the Dṛg-Dṛśya-Viveka, consists in knowing that Nama and Rupa belongs to Jagat, the world, and existence, consciousness, happiness, the Satchit Ananda belongs to Brahman. The first 3 belong to Brahman, the last 2 belong to the world. But what do we experience? We generally experience only the last 2, which is name and form, because they are tangible and in front of our indriyas. And therefore we miss the Satchit, because of which we are able to see Namarupa and experience Namarupa. So this mixing up again is based on Ajnanam, based on ignorance, and it requires proper enquiry to be able to deal with it. So Krishna says in the Gita that if you have to be able to live comfortably in this world, you have to understand that Namarupa is temporary and cannot give you lasting security. And therefore Krishna says that you have to be content as well as independent. And they go together. All this is got through Shravanam. All this knowledge comes from where? From listening to the scriptures. Because the scriptures which talk about all this, and therefore Shravanam. So I may have all the knowledge, but I may still not be free of disturbances. So again, we're talking about the fact that there are 3 steps in Jnanam. One is Shravanam, one is Mananam, and one is Nidhi Dhyasanam. I'm not talking about Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga, which are prerequisite steps for coming to Jnana Yoga. So unless you have done Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga, you won't be able to come to Jnanam at all. But having done that, what does Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga give you? It gives you Chitta Shuddhi, quietude of mind. Once having got that, you come to Shravanam and then Mananam. And once you have completed Shravanam and Mananam, what is the result? You know without any doubt that you are Brahman. The problem is, sometimes, in fact, for the majority of people, even though I know without doubt that I am Brahman, which is the result of my Shravanam and Mananam, I will find that the emotional problems in my life continue. And this shows that assimilation has not taken place. And therefore, you must devote exclusive time for Nidhi Dhyasanam, which Krishna talks about in chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita, or Yoga Sutras talk about it, Samadhi. So here we say that if you find that your emotional disturbances have not been removed after Shravanam and Mananam, then you must necessarily go in for Samadhi Abhyasa, which we called Nididhyasanam in the Bhagavad Gita. So Samadhi Abhyasa or Abhyasa, of course, practice. Samadhi Abhyasa means practice of Samadhi, sitting down in Samadhi regularly. So the Samadhi can be divided, says this text, into two basic classes, two basic subsections. One is Antara Samadhi, internal Samadhi, and one is Bahya Samadhi, external Samadhi. And furthermore, Antara Samadhi can be divided into two, Savikalpa and Nirvikalpa. And Bahya Samadhi can also be divided into two, Savikalpa and Nirvikalpa. Now, Savikalpa Samadhi can further be divided into two, Dṛśya Anuviddha Samadhi and Shabda Anuviddha Samadhi. So, the one type of Samadhi is Antara Savikalpa Dṛśya Anuviddha Samadhi, also Antara Savikalpa Shabda Anuviddha Samadhi, and Antara Nirvikalpa Samadhi. How many are there? 3. That is Antara, internal Savikalpa Dṛśya Samadhi, Antara Savikalpa Shabda Anuviddha Samadhi, 2, and Antara Nirvikalpa Samadhi, 3. Similarly, Bahya Savikalpa Dṛśya Anuviddha Samadhi, Bahya Savikalpa Shabda Anuviddha Samadhi, and Bahya Nirvikalpa Samadhi. 6 types of Samadhis are talked about in the text. So what is Antara Samadhi? Antara Samadhi literally means internal Samadhi, where you are sitting and eyes are closed. You are focused on the thoughts in your mind. While Bahya Samadhi is focused outside. So effectively, it is open eye meditation. And both these Antara and Bahya can be of two types. Savikalpaha. Savikalpaha means where there is duality, where there is division between the meditator and the object of meditation. Nirvikalpa means where the division has disappeared. The meditator and the object of meditation, there is no difference at all. So hence Antara Samadhi Savikalpaha, Antara Samadhi Nirvikalpaha. Same with Bahya Samadhi Savikalpaha, Bahya Samadhi Nirvikalpaha. What is Savikalpa Samadhi? Savikalpa means with differences. And therefore with differences mean what? You use a support. And therefore when you say Savikalpa Dṛśya Anuviddha, Dṛśya means what? What you are seeing, the object. And therefore when you say Savikalpa Dṛśya Anuviddha, Anuviddha means associated with. So Savikalpa Dṛśya Anuviddha means Samadhi, Savikalpa Samadhi associated with an object, which is what we normally do. For example, you focus on light, right? That is, or you focus on the image of a Ishtadevata. These are all Dṛśya Anuviddha because you are using the support of a object outside you for trying to focus. Like a candle light is used, for example, or Ishtadevata is used, for example. So that is Dṛśya Anuviddha. And then there is Shabda Anuviddha, associated with the word. So here you can use Vedantic words like Aham Sakshi, Aham Satyam, Aham Nityam. All those things which you have studied during Shravanam and Mananam we can use. So these are two. And therefore, there are a few verses which deal with these types of samadhis. And Antara Savikalpa Dṛśya Anuviddha Samadhi, where the mind entertains certain thoughts, right? In the thoughts, what happens with thoughts? They change every second. But generally what happens, we notice only the changing thoughts, but we don't notice that principle because of which we are able to notice the changing thoughts. To carefully understand, your thoughts change and therefore you notice only changing thoughts, but you do not notice that consciousness principle because of which you are able to notice those thoughts. So in meditation, thoughts themselves are initially used as support because they have a form and are easier to focus upon. And later on, we have to shift the focus from the form to the consciousness, to the sakshi, which is formless. And we have to learn how to differentiate between the two. And therefore, when I focus on sakshi, then I am focusing on myself as the witness of every thought and also as the witness of no thoughts. So that is the Antara Samadhi. Then you have Antara Savikalpa Shabda Anuvidha Samadhi, where you are associating yourself with thoughts for the purpose Chitta Shuddhi. So after a prolonged practice of this kind of meditation, what will happen is the mind will be able to easily shift from a focus on a thought to the focus on the principle, consciousness principle. And while the thoughts may remain in the background, the thoughts will no longer disturb you. And Shastra says that here you are focusing on the consciousness principle. How? Not with the help of any thought, but with the help of Upanishadic words. Those words which describe the consciousness principle, which describe the Atma, like Asangaha, Satchitanandaha, etc., etc. So I am relationless, I am pure consciousness, I am pure existence. All those thoughts, this is called Vedantic word associated Nididhyasana. That is Antara Savikalpa Shabda Anuvidha Samadhi, associated with the words of the Vedas, not with just any words. Okay. Now, an important principle is that in the first two stages, the Savikalpa stages, I am using my willpower to deliberately invoke myself as the witness consciousness, right? But what is active? My mind, the ahankara is active. And when ahankara is active, there is a division between the subject and the object. And here what happens is that, what is the object? The object is supposed to be the consciousness principle, which happens to be the subject also, right? And therefore, I have to have this practice of constant repetition and focusing on a thought till the mind falls into some sort of a habit. So this thought keeps on recurring in my mind until it is repeated automatically even after the ahankara becomes withdrawn. And therefore, my deliberate use of willpower is dropped. This capacity of my subconscious mind to entertain a thought without requiring the willpower, this is where meditation moves from Savikalpa to Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So this is where we had stopped last time. In the next session, we will repeat verse number 26, which deals with Antara Nirvikalpa Samadhi. I'll just stop here. Any questions?
I have a little doubt. I mean, it's from my ignorance only. Like when you say the first set is world and the sense organs, I mean indriyas, and the second is the indriya and manaha, and the third manaha and then ego. You were saying ahamkara. So I have doubt there only. You have used few terminologies. One is reflected consciousness, one is atman, and so I just wanted to clarify those things. Maybe like I'm mistakenly like, so there is Atman,
yes,
and another thing is reflected consciousness, right?
Yes.
So Atman and consciousness, is there any consciousness? Like then consciousness is the Atman?
See, the difference between the two is that Atman by itself is akarta. It cannot do anything.
Yes.
Therefore, it cannot even know anything.
See.
Know
Yes.
or see. So no,
observe, sakshi. It cannot be sakshi.
Cannot be sakshi. Whenever we use the term sakshi, we should remember that it is the reflected conscious. Ahankara is the sakshi. It's always
Okay. Now, sir,
ahankara is the sakshi. Yeah.
Okay, so that ahankara term is, we have seen that mano buddhi chitta ahankara, that total mind. So that ahankara is this, that means ego is this. I mean, that same ahankara is this ahankara you are talking
Yes,
about?
it is the same ahankara. Ahankara generally means, in the Vedantic sense, it means Sukshma Shariram plus the consciousness reflected by Sukshma Shariram.
Okay, so I just repeat whatever I have understood, only I have doubt that part. So there is like a karta thing, that is Atman,
Yeah.
but whenever something is done, that means manaha is being seen. So that is done by the reflected consciousness or the ahamkara, right?
See, when you know that there are thoughts in your mind,
Yes,
your mind is the object. Who's
yes,
seeing? Your mind is seeing
reflected
again.
consciousness.
Your reflected consciousness is the seer.
Yeah,
Reflect, and
seer.
where does it reflect? It reflects in the mind itself. So that's
Okay.
what makes it tricky.
And so the I, what you're saying, now you know I, so that I is the Atman one?
Atman I doesn't do anything. It only,
Yes.
Atman I cannot do anything. So that's the most common
Okay,
mistake.
so
You don't think of
yeah,
Atman, you are the Atman, right? But if you
okay,
want to be able to recognize the thoughts in your mind, it has to be the
then I have to be reflected
Uh,
consciousness.
RC
I
or
should.
RC is what recognizes. OC can do nothing.
Okay, sir.
That
Okay.
clarity should be
Okay.
there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so this will stop, and thank you for being there. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat. Om Namah
Om
Shivaya. Thank you for your
Om Namah
patience.
Shivaya.
Om Namah
Thank
Shivaya. Thank you, Acharya.
Thank you, sir.
Om Namah Shivaya.
Namah
Thank you,
Shivaya.
sir.